Hey everybody, welcome back to Top Ends of Twins. We are heading into game week 9 of the Premier League season, and things are going relatively well for my team. What about you, Luke? How are things going for you?
Do we have to talk about my team? I know we do a podcast about our teams and FPL in general, but my team has really been underperforming up to this point in the season. And here we are about to go into game week 9. It hasn't been going great. But before I talk about my team, tell everyone exactly how your team performed this week, Paul.
Yeah, so I am currently sitting on 49 points. We're recording this Monday around 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, where the bonus points, I guess, haven't really hit from the Crystal Palace. And
They have.
They have?
Yes,
Okay.
they have.
Well, all the squads haven't moved around because I should have one more point coming on to give me 50 points in this match week.
Yeah, so it usually takes about an hour or so following everything being submitted. I think they're submitted. It should be going into effect sometime in the next couple.
Yeah.
Probably by the time we get done with this podcast.
Yeah. So had a relatively good week. I mean, compared to the rest of where FPL was performing this week, I absolutely did better than the weekly standard. But, I mean, honestly, if you look at my team, I just have the Watkins goal, a McNeil assist, and then the Salah assist and goal, which he had my captaincy. So that really played out well for me, which we're going to discuss later in the podcast. I don't have Haaland in my team, as we've talked about, and that's worked out very well for me. So I've been a lucky boy, I'd say, and partly for other reasons, which we'll discuss farther on.
To insert myself there really quick,
go
though,
ahead.
I don't know if that's entirely luck, though, right? Because since we've seen Rodri go down with his ACL tear back in, what was that, game week 5 or 6, I believe?
Yeah, that's correct.
City haven't looked the same. Erling Haaland had 13 touches, and he did not have, I think he had one attempt, and that was not even close. His XG has dropped off a cliff since Rodri was hurt. And that's exactly, what you want if you don't have him in your team.
Yeah, that was kind of my original thesis, I guess. But let's go ahead and hear about your team, Luke, and then we can kind of bounce onto some other topics, which will include City.
Oh, what a fun topic, my team. So I ended up, before the deadline, I decided that I was going to go a bit differential, and I was going to captain Phil Foden. I wake up Saturday morning. Everything's good. Watch Spurs. I'm double it up on Spurs. I have Brennan Johnson and Solanke, who ended up blanking.
Which is very unfortunate with the layout
with
of how
4
that
goals.
Spurs match played out.
It is what it is. I'm like, okay, I was just unfortunate, but I'm sure my captain's going to go out and put in a great performance for Man City. And Foden was not even in the starting 11. When I saw the team sheet come out, I didn't believe it at first. I do not understand what's going on at Man City with Foden at the moment. It seems like Pep is saving him to just play in Champions League and their cup matches. And then in the Premier League, I to be very frank, I think he's trying to compensate for not having Rodri. And he wants more stability, more control. Kovacic, Rico Lewis,
Gundo.
Bernardo Silva, Gundo, all of those are probably ways he's trying to fill that void without Rodri. And Foden can't find his way into the team right now when it seems like what they really need is someone to be creative and someone who can occupy that half space and create chances and opportunities.
Yeah.
I didn't have any words for him not playing, right? And then it goes on.
You did have words.
I had a lot of words,
I will
but
say.
now I'm struggling to get to it because it just... Foden was one of the best players in the Premier League last year. Was he the best? I'll leave that up to your interpretation.
So I'm going to bring up a point that me and Luke were talking about the other day, which Luke drew the comparison between City not playing Foden as the same as Arsenal not playing Saka. So if you're listening to this podcast, I want you to respond on our Twitter, on whatever it is, and just let us know what you think about that, because we fundamentally disagreed on that.
Well,
I don't want to have an argument.
No, we're not arguing. I'm just going to lay out the way I see it, right? I think Foden is almost as instrumental to the way Man City play. And whenever they're playing teams that sit deep in a block, right, in their own half, Foden, the way he can occupy the little half spaces, maneuver around, and create other space for himself to create a shot or create opportunities for other players, I think it's almost equally as important to how City play as to how Saka plays for Arsenal. That's the basis of my argument. I'd be very interested to hear what you all have to say on that. But
I obviously disagree with him, but it's fine.
Yeah,
It's an interesting debate. It is.
Paul and I disagree on a lot of things related to the sport of football. That's how it is. But, it makes, things are always interesting. There's no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was saying, right, I fortunately ended up with a very jammy assist from Foden pretty much at the death to John Stones.
I looked at Luke 5 minutes before that, and I said, they're going to find a way to fucking score. They always do. And
I will say, though, that's not typical City. City usually aren't the ones who find a late winner. That's Liverpool, Arsenal of a couple seasons ago. City usually do not find that late winner.
Yeah, they don't usually have to be in that situation. That's realistically
very
what
true.
It is. But, I mean, I think overall, I was impressed by Wolves. I think a lot of people expected them to get absolutely thumped this match. And they put up a great fight. They deserve to get a point out of that match, in my opinion.
Here's the thing with Wolves. They've had one of probably the most difficult starts to the season based upon the opponents they're playing. And they're going to work their way at the table. There's no way they don't. They're a talented team. Yeah, Gary O'Neill's a very good manager. We'll see them moving up the table, and we'll kind of circle back to Wolves later on in the podcast.
Yeah,
because they're a hot topic within the FPL community right now. But ultimately ended up on 32 points. I had 2 returns in my team. And going into the week, I thought 60 points is probably the minimum from my team. And I get about half of that. So it is a very frustrating end of game week 8. Looking forward to moving on to game week 9 and just forgetting about this week altogether.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's the thing. Like, we did the pod last week where we kind of made transfers for each other's teams, and I really didn't find that many transfers that I wanted to make in your team, realistically, because it looks like you were so well set up for this, especially this match week, and then you're well set up going forward also. But this looked like it was going to be a pearl of a week for you, but that's FPL. It's just a down week. There's players that we don't expect to score, low-scoring games. Outcomes of fixtures that we don't expect. So that's part of what you get as an FPL manager,
Yes, it is. It really is. One quick note I want to make here. If we look at the statistics, right, from the last 5 game weeks, Manchester City are currently sitting at, what is it? 11th overall for XG created, which is incredibly rare for Manchester City. Usually they're creating lots of chances and high opportunity chances. They're currently not doing that. Fulham have created the most XG according to understat.com. And obviously, as we've said many times, every XG model is going to be a little bit different. So you have to take them with a grain of salt unless you're looking at the exact same data we are. So go look at understat.com. It's a free website. Great resource of information there. But interesting to note that Man City is very far down the table for XG created.
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing too where I don't know if I see a light at the end of the tunnel for Man City with turning their XG. I mean, maybe Foden comes on, maybe Pep tweaks the system a little bit, but what they're doing right now honestly just doesn't seem to be working. And I would say that they've been very lucky so far. I mean, I think they were it really in the Arsenal match. It didn't feel like they were going to find that late goal against Fulham. They should have lost if Traore knew what a ball looked like. And then in this last match against Wolves, I mean, I think they were. This one felt like they were going to score. It did, but it just feels like they don't. I'm not even trying to really like shit on them. It just feels like they just don't have the creativity, as your numbers are stating, Luke, to really be the behemoth that we think they are.
Without diving too deep into the tactical way that people are playing City, it seems like every single time what happens is they create this U within the pass map, right? Where everything is going around the outside back to the center backs and then circling back around to the wingers. And then the play dies there, right? They're not getting that incisive pass to the middle of the pitch that really opens up teams with someone like KDB or Foden occupying that space and receiving the ball and turning. right? That's the big difference there. And
That's the light of the
if
tunnel.
KDB comes back, which he could be back for game week 9, we could see a very different Manchester City if he is back.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing with KDB is that he is most likely the most dangerous person with the ball at his feet in Europe whenever he's in form and healthy. So things will change for them, and Haaland's going to find things a lot easier. So I was wrong. I didn't forget about KDB, but he wasn't at the top of my mind. But if he comes back and he's fully healthy, things will get easier for them.
For sure. Without a doubt, they will. But I really think that game week 8 was disappointing for a lot of managers out there.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the managers who were probably most disappointed is those that kept Saka going into game week 8. With Sakagate going on.
Do we want to discuss this, Luke? Because I think this is an interesting...
We for sure... Let's go into it. You lead the way, I'll follow.
Am I supposed to talk about Sakagate or Saka himself?
Sakagate, yes.
I honestly...
Okay, Sakagate.
Go ahead, Luke.
Sakagate was going into Friday night. Arsenal arrived at their team hotel down in Bournemouth after making the trip down. And, of course, there were fans there to greet them, to say hi to the players, hopefully get an autograph. And someone was happening to be filming all the players walking into the hotel. And it became very questionable whether Saka walked in or whether he did not. So
there was a player that was walking that kind of had their hands in their sleeves and like their hood up. And so I think people kind of thought, oh, is that Saka? Is it not? And they couldn't really tell because the video was kind of grainy. And so there, in that exact hotel, there was a guy that plays he's a large content creator, Andy Martin. And he somehow, I guess he lives close near Bournemouth. And so he went to the hotel and he got a picture. Like somehow he managed to convince the front desk to let him in and like to take a picture and everything. And so he got a picture and like scoped it out and like, it was honestly
but
it was so funny to follow.
The point of him taking the picture was to compare his height to see if it compared to Saka's or not. Mm-hmm. To hopefully overarchingly guess if Saka was playing or not. And then we had another issue potentially where maybe some content creators figured out a leak ahead of time. Whatever that situation is, so be it. You know, that's just going to play out however it does. But it was really funny to see the FPL community just losing its mind over, is Saka playing? Is he not? And then the crazy ideas that come out of that.
Yeah, it just shows that it's kind of like social media in general, that there's a narrative that kind of forms about certain things. And I mean, if these content creators had the information and they didn't share with their followers and made the transfers themselves, that's their prerogative, Because I mean, at the end of the day, in my opinion, I wouldn't say they owe anything to people. But whenever the line is to me, whenever you're charging people, whenever you're making them pay for a service that you provide, you don't share that information. That's just me, though.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. And we don't have to dive too deep into that because I think everyone's going to have a different opinion on that, right? It's going to come down to the person, and I can see both sides of the argument.
Political, But let's just talk about Saka for a little bit, Luke.
Okay,
because I think this is a question that's going to plague a lot of FPL managers that own Saka or don't own him.
What side of the fence do you sit on, Paul? If you have Saka right now, would you be selling or would you be holding?
I do have Saka, so this is a great way, a little thought experiment. I would sell Saka.
So you're going to be selling Saka?
Yeah, but I'm also talking to somebody that has a wild card in my back pocket and that will be using it soon because I think just based on the layout of FPL right now, I think there's some options probably within that same kind of price bracket or a little bit lower that are good options to pivot to, especially I think the number one option is Son.
I like Son a lot.
He had a goal on the weekend, goal and assist for some people that would disagree with how FPL played that situation. But at the end of the day, I think one of the main things we were talking about with Son coming back, I think it was last week, was the amount of chances that Timo Werner's had at that left wing position. And it just seems to be a spot that like Spurs generate a bunch of chances there, which Ainge said that last year whenever they were having the issues with the striker that like he wanted Son on the left wing because that's where his teams mostly generate their chances. And I mean, Son just is, he's so deadly. I mean, he gets a defender 1-on-1. You saw what he did against West Ham this past weekend. he's just so hard to stop. He can go either way. Like, he can cut you either way. He can find a ball. He can do anything you'd ask of a winger. So I think he's a really good option going forward. And I think Spurs fixtures are turning, and they're looking better. I mean, I don't know if it's time to invest in Spurs defense, but Son, Johnson, Kulusevski, Solanke, you have a plethora of options at Spurs that I think are all really good.
Here's the thing, right? Spurs have Crystal Palace in game week 9. It is at Selhurst Park, but I would not be opposed to someone captaining Son for that fixture.
No.
Crystal Palace have looked abysmal. And if you know,
I'm controlling myself to not just scream.
Yeah, we're not gonna rip into Crystal Palace too much, but strictly looking at it going forward perspective, Tottenham assets could feast yet again in game week 9. And then after that, they have Villa at home, which you would think that will be there'll be a lot of goals in that game with both teams playing very high lines. Then they have Ipswich at home, Man City away, Fulham at home, but then their run is still great all the way up to game week 16. So
yeah,
I personally am someone who have double Spurs attack. Very, very unfortunate in my opinion to not get any returns from them with 4 goals in game week 8. But I'm happy to keep my assets that I currently have for quite a while, especially at the price points that I have them at. So
yeah, and Luke, to kind of get back to the
Saka question.
Question. I mean, I do think that like Son and Saka both kind of fall in the same category, that they both are kind of fixture proof, that like they can play the best teams in the league. So the reason why I'm saying sell Saka is because like I do still think he's fixture proof, but I also think there's a chance he may not play against Liverpool. I do not think he'll play the midweek in the Champions League match. And the reports from today, it is 10:21. He was not in training today. They had an open training where it was like open to the press, and he was not publicly visible. I can't talk visible in the training, but Arteta seems to be hinting at him being back soon, so he could make an appearance. He could play 95 minutes against Liverpool.
Well, Arteta basically said that he'd be available for the weekend, and they didn't even travel. You cannot trust a single word that Arteta says.
No, Arteta just straight up lies about that stuff.
He's looking for any advantage he can get over competition.
I don't blame him.
I don't either. Frankly, if I was a manager, I'd be the same way. I would almost blatantly lie about players having injuries. It's just how it goes, right?
You know, Luke, I just had a really good thought that I want to share with you.
Let's hear it.
I wish this Arsenal team would have learned something from the pickpockets of the summer. And that if they could just pickpocket the refs and take that red card right out of the pocket, we wouldn't have a problem.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. No, I think that's a solution. I think it really is.
It's a solution. It's definitely something.
Yeah.
I don't know if you should follow through on the idea though. But hey,
just an idea. But Luke, where do you fall on Saka?
Saka, if you have him in your team right now, I think he's a sell, because there's a lot of variability in does he start. But on top of that, the fixtures I think are very difficult for the next 3 fixtures. And there's Champions League squished in there. There's cup matches. God forbid Arteta play him in a cup match at this point, because what is the point in that? But what I'm trying to say here is I'm really worried about the fixtures that Arsenal have. And on top of that, if we don't know if Saka's playing, I think he's a must sell, because there's so many other options out there. And this season, I truly believe, is going to be defined about how you rotate those premium assets. So your Sakas, your Sons, your Palmers, even Haaland situationally, Trent, how you rotate these players in and out of your team and manage that, because all of these players can return massively. Mm-hmm. They can go out in any given week and give you a goal and an assist, 3 assists, a penalty here and there. Like, all of these players have that capacity, and knowing when to get off one and get onto the other is going to be the most important thing we do this season. And I think now is the time to get off Son. Well, to be honest, I think game week 8 was the time to get off of Saka. That was the time to move him on and get him out, because he was a doubt, right? And a lot of people thought he was going to be playing, but with him leaving the England camp, it seemed a lot more serious than a lot of people let on.
Yeah, I mean,
in my head, that's how I saw it.
the thing about that though, because it's so difficult with Saka because he always plays through injuries.
Exactly, but he
Arsenal
wouldn't
are
have left camp.
always-
He wouldn't have left camp if it wasn't something serious. And anytime it's a
I don't know.
hamstring, anytime that's mentioned, you have to take it seriously, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's concerning, especially as an Arsenal fan. But we move forward.
Yeah, so to kind of put a bow on that point, I think that Saka is someone that I would recommend anyone out there, if you have him, probably move him on to another premium asset. I know it can be difficult, but we've got some premium assets like Son, like Palmer. If you want to roll the dice on Foden, I don't recommend it, but they have Southampton at home. That's a really juicy fixture for any Manchester City asset. There's lots of good options to move Saka onto, and then you can come back to him at game week 12 or 13, whenever you see best fits your team. So,
Yeah, I have a hot take for you about the best City asset heading into Southampton.
is it Gvardiol?
No,
Okay, who do you think?
I think it's Gundo.
What about his performance makes you think that in game week 8?
So it hasn't been the best, but to me, he's a good enough player where he's going to figure it out, and he will figure it out eventually. And he's been in positions where an informed version of himself probably would have had 3 or 4 goals by this point of the season. I mean, if you look at the last couple matches, he's averaging 0.46 XG. He's averaging 0.4, 0.5, all these different things. And I mean, that's due to like the nature of where City's possessing the ball and the spaces he's occupying. But I think at his price point, I think against the fixture they have, he's a good 1 week shout.
Here's the thing, though, with Gundo, that what I'm seeing, one of his best, and probably his superpower, is his ability to kind of disappear and then make runs off the ball. He is hyper intelligent in how he does that. But the main problem with him doing this right now is when he makes those runs, it's usually Kovacic that has the ball. Kovacic's skill set is not lifting a ball over the back line of a defense and finding a midfield run.
Yeah,
that's not
that's
what
fair.
he excels at.
That's true.
So, in my opinion, I think Gundo is someone who it's possible he can return. I just don't think the likelihood of it happening is not something that would move me and convince me that this is going to be a worthwhile pick.
Fair enough. We'll see.
We'll see what happens. But I do think that fixture for City in game week 9 with Southampton at home is a really, really good fixture to target, and kind of pivots us to our next question of the pod. What do you think of triple captaining Erling Haaland in game week 9?
I think it's a great differential idea for a triple captain. Would I do it? No, I wouldn't. It's not like he's been missing chances. It's not like they just haven't been creating the chances like we were talking about. So, I mean, Southampton have been good in moments too. Like, it's not like Southampton have been just like utterly horrible the whole year. So I don't like that idea.
You don't like the idea of captaining Haaland? Okay.
You said triple captaining.
Triple captaining, yes,
No.
exactly. Triple captain is what I'm insinuating here.
There's no chance that I would.
What makes me think that it might be a good idea? Southampton are going to go to the Etihad, and they're going to try to play their brand of football. They're not going to sit deep. They're not going to pack it back. They're going to try to play through City. And you know what's going to happen. They're going to have one shot on goal with an XG of 0.002.
That Ederson's going to let just drift right by him.
And they're going to kill the clean sheet because Manchester City just cannot keep clean sheets to save their lives. Oh, well, right? That is how it goes. But as far as triple captaining Haaland, I'm a bit skeptical myself.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
I don't know if he's going to be getting the opportunities that he was as of even just really it was, I guess his best performance recently was for Norway when when they played Slovenia. He got 2 goals. The last time he had a really good. He scored against Arsenal, right? Like that was the last time he scored in the Premier League.
Yeah, and that was a chance that we easily expect him to finish.
And at this point, that's almost exactly a month ago. He has not scored a Premier League goal in almost a month.
And guess who hasn't owned him?
Yeah, it was a great call by you, Paul.
Yeah, but I was terrified. We were joking about me shaking in a corner about this match last weekend. This next one scares me a lot too.
This one would scare me if I were you, probably more so, because Wolves were very practical in how they approached the match. I don't know if Southampton will be practical in how they approach it.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, Wolves did give up 6 to Chelsea, so that was the fear.
Right. But this is just all like in the setup, right? How they approach the match, I think, is what changes that ultimately. Well, yeah, no, I think anyone who does put the triple captain on Haaland, it's kind of heavy in risk, in my opinion, but it could easily pay out.
Yeah.
This is a good time to kind of talk captaincy for Game Week 9. Outside of Haaland, is there anyone else out there that kind of seems like a really good fit or someone that you'd be interested in captaining, Paul?
Yeah, I think there's some good options next week that could be differential captains. Cole Palmer against Newcastle, that could be a good shout. You have Spurs playing Crystal Palace. I think you could go sneaky differential of Brennan Johnson. I would personally put it on Son. I think I'm also, we can talk about this right now, Luke. I'm also kind of questioning my ownership of Sakagate at this point.
Okay, let's talk about it. I
feel like there's just been a couple matches now that like he's just not directly, it seems like, involved with a lot of the goals. And yes, I realize he's involved in the build up, and I'm not like saying anything about him as a player overall, but it just feels like he's not going to be like a figurehead of their attack, which is something that I really want, especially from a forward, because I think there's other options out there that, maybe they're not on as attacking teams or all these different things, but there's still like, if there's a goal in that team, I basically know where it's coming from,
Right, exactly. And I completely agree with that as well. That he's been dropping really deep and building up the play, holding up the play pretty well, right? Facilitating the, movement of the ball vertically. But he hasn't been in those chances where the wingers are able to find him for crosses. It's really weird because it's like, I think they're still learning to play with each other. He's making runs. Yeah. It's just the ball's not finding him. And I think that will come with time.
I don't know. I do think that partly is due to Spurs midfield. Like if you look at the layout of their midfield, a lot of those players aren't like progressive ball players per se, like moving the ball forward with a pass.
I think Madison's really good at it.
Like so Madison is, but Madison I honestly just consider part of the attack. I'm talking like more of like their sixes, like Basuma.
Well, so what they've been before this match, what Postecoglou had been doing is playing Bentancur as just the holding mid, and then playing 2 attacking midfielders, right?
Yeah,
like Madison and Kulusevski. Yeah. It was interesting to see Basuma starting because he offers a very different skill set, and he's a bit more
he scored on the weekend too.
Aggressive. Yeah, first
That's
goal for Tottenham.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. I think
Solanke. Go ahead.
I was just saying that to me, he just doesn't feel like. I don't know. I just think there's better options out there maybe at this point as a forward spot.
He has been putting up good numbers over the course of the season. The last couple weeks have been a little worrisome, and he is certainly underperforming his expected numbers. According to understat.com, he has an XG of 4.54 with 2 goals.
Yeah,
so he's underperforming by over 2 goals.
Yeah.
Right. A little worrisome there, but that's probably just him settling into the role, and I see him coming good in the long run and with the fixtures, I'm not going to take out a Spurs attacker.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'd say I just have questions this time right now about him as one of my forward spots. But to get back to your original question too, Luke, for captaincy shouts, I also think Brian Mbomo could be a good pick against Ipswich. I think that's a fixture that he could easily have 2 goals or a goal and assist in. And then, I don't know, if you really want to play games, you could go with like a Mo Salah captaincy against Arsenal. I mean, this I hate to say it as an Arsenal fan, but I mean, you're going to see an Arsenal back line of 2 center backs that probably have not played together.
Right.
And then also maybe without Saka and Odegaard, so Arsenal are going to probably struggle to have control of the match. So I don't know. Salah could have a field day. You never know.
It was weird though. Salah ended up having one of the biggest returns of the week because it was a low-scoring game week. But his numbers in open play were really poor. They were very surprising whenever I saw them. Give me 1 second and I can pull those up. But I think kind of what we need to talk about here, another point to bring up, I think this will be another hot topic within the FPL community this week is Trent really worth the price that we're paying for him?
He's not.
Okay,
guys.
Go ahead, Paul, and I'll come back with those Salah stats here in a second.
No, I mean, I think you're going to get clean sheets out of Trent, but it just doesn't seem like this is the kind of like the way that Slot's playing him. Like he's not inverting. He's kind of just playing more as like a, I guess, overlapping right back. I mean, he's playing in those balls from like a little bit of a distance and sometimes getting forward, but he's not playing in that like super progressive role. And he still has the ability on corners, on set pieces and everything to give you an option there. But I just don't think for his price point he's worth it. I mean, you can go drop down like what is it? 1.1 million in Guardiola, who is he seems like a better opportunity to get like a goal out of it, you know? Just an open play, really.
And there's so many, I think, defensive assets that have a high ceiling at the moment. Look at Wolves, who are coming into a great run of fixtures.
The Wolves.
Reine Nori has great potential at almost he's 3 million cheaper. And what that does for your team, what you can do is vastly different with Trent and without him. The problem is once you go off Trent, he's probably going to continue to go up in price because you know he's going to have the odd return here or there. And you just have to be okay with missing out on that. Going back to Salah, he in open play, he had an XG of 0.01 and an XA of 0.12. So an overall XGI of 0.13. And that's not factoring in the XG from the penalty. That's not something that makes me overall convinced that he's someone that's worth captaining against Arsenal, right? Because Arsenal is going to be harder to score against than Chelsea.
Yeah,
They're going to be without Saliba, maybe without Saka. Odegaard probably won't be back by that point. Maybe no Timber. So there's a lot of potential weaknesses that might come up, but Arsenal are still going to be good defensively regardless. Yeah. That is how they build their team. That's their backbone.
Yeah, and we do know that Arteta, like we talked about earlier, he doesn't care what he does with this team. He just wants to get a result. So it wouldn't surprise me with him going away to Anfield if he kind of plays it where they sit back, just kind of wait, maybe try to get Liverpool on the counter, because we know Liverpool honestly would probably prefer to defer the ball at this point, where I think they kind of like almost not having the ball at times. So it's going to be an interesting matchup to see how they both kind of approach each other.
Yeah, it really will be. I am very excited to watch that match between Liverpool and Arsenal. That's going to be a really fun one to kind of just dig our teeth into and break down afterwards. But here's the thing. I think that Arsenal are in this point where, and you can probably comment on this better than I can, Paul, where they have really struggled up to this point in the season. And for whatever reasons, you can, provide that context yourself. But I think after going through this with how many injuries they have had across the board to key players, I think a couple weeks from now when they get all those players back, they're healthy, everyone's returned from injuries, suspensions, whatever it may be, I think they're going to go on an absolute tear. And that's probably going to start right around game week 12 when that run that they have from 12 all the way to 19, the best team they play as of right now is probably Fulham. That's the best team they play.
Yeah.
So be warned. I think that's the time to have double Arsenal defense and to have Saka and just roll the dice and just trust that team, because they, after going through the struggle that they've had lately, they're going to absolutely, I think, tear the league up.
Yeah. I'm just gonna go on this little rant right now.
Yeah, take the mic.
I think Arsenal have been very naive this year. I really do. I'm not even gonna go on a rant that, I mean, I've had moments where I've talked to Luke where I've been like, the Premier League's rigging the Premier League against Arsenal, and like there's all these conspiracy, like, and honestly it's really not that deep. I think at the end of the day, a lot of these Premier League refs, just some of them aren't good at their jobs. Like realistically, they're just not. And there's moments of inconsistency because different refs have different objectives, maybe different interpretations of the rules and all that. And sometimes as an Arsenal fan, I dive too deep into it. But realistically, I think Arsenal have just, like I said, been naive. Like, you get goaded into 2 red cards. You get a red card for a bad challenge because you're in a bad position because somebody plays the ball back. But honestly, at the end of the day, I think Arsenal, for what's happened this season, are not in a bad position. I mean, they went away to Manchester City and got a point out of it. They went to Villa Park, got 3 points out of that. They went to where else did they also play on the road? They played somewhere else on the road too. That was a tough fixture, but I mean, they've had a difficult run of fixtures, and if you look at the injuries that they've had, I think overall they're not in a bad position. I mean, when you get Odegaard, Saka, what I'm really hoping is that kind of last year after Christmas, we saw that run where the defense really solidified, all the pieces came together, and if Arsenal can get the attack back, if they can get their defenders in positions, I still think they're in a good position, because I mean, all this stuff, the podcast, the content we all consume as Premier League fans, it's so reactionary, and we do the same thing on our podcast. So we feed the content beast a little bit too, you know. But I mean, it's all just so week to week, and over the whole season, I mean, realistically, if Arsenal lose at Anfield on Sunday, they're 7 points behind Liverpool. And I mean, that's something that, like, Liverpool's not going to be perfect. City's not going to be perfect. We've seen that this year, and obviously, City are the reigning champions for 4 straight years for a reason. But I mean, there is a major chink in their armor with Roger being out. So
here's my thing about that, right? What I see there is that if you're Arsenal, let's imagine that this is tug of war, right? The most important thing that you have to do is just stay on the rope. You can't let go, right?
Yeah.
If you have a slide where they go to Liverpool, they drop all 3 points. That's bad, but it's not the end of the world. Where they get into trouble is the week afterwards if they're dropping points
it's the
after
reaction.
that.
You're exactly right, Luke.
Those points that they're dropping following those difficult results, like we talked about this with Bournemouth, that's a difficult fixture. Going away to one of the best coach teams in the Premier League, that's a tough fixture regardless, if you have all your players or not. So the value that you're dropping there in points, it's possible they would have dropped the points regardless, in my opinion, right? Some Arsenal fans would probably disagree with that entirely.
Yeah.
You have to keep everything in perspective, and just as an Arsenal fan, just keep in mind the most important thing is that you're not consistently dropping points. You have to be getting those 3 points and keeping pressure on those top teams. And I know it's difficult because you have so many players out, but that's just, you have to find a way. You have to find a way to get those points right now. Because eventually the points will come easier. But right now it's just a struggle.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, if you're looking at Arsenal's schedule, like the results so far, I mean, you go to the match week 3 when they tied Brighton. Without the red card, they had complete control of that match, and that match should have been over by that point. And then you win it. You win in the North London derby on the road. You tie with Man City when realistically you should have won. You beat Leicester in a weird fucking match. Southampton, same. And then in Bournemouth, if you don't get the red card, maybe Arsenal finds a way to win. There's a scenario where Arsenal have won every match they played this season. And I don't mean that in like a whatever. Like it's entirely possible where you're at that situation. So that's what I'm saying. These narratives are so weekly, so day to day, that at the end of the season, we'll just have to see what happens, you know?
Yes, we will. Without a doubt. It's going to be, hopefully, we have a 4 to 5 team title race. I know that is asking a lot of the Premier League.
No chance.
But just imagine going into game week 35, game week 36, and there are 4 teams that could possibly win the league. That is just something that we've never experienced. It would be incredible to have that.
Yeah. I mean, really, hopefully it's just a one-team race and Arsenal are running away with it.
Yeah, that's possible, Paul. We're gonna go with that as possible.
I mean, it is possible. I mean, I don't think it's realistic, but I mean, it's entirely possible. It's possible that Wolves are running away with it.
Anything's possible.
At this point in the season, anything's still possible.
You know what's the most possible situation? Maybe one day Dean Henderson keeps a clean sheet.
No, it's not.
Or
you waited long enough to bring that up.
Even better, maybe Phil Foden starts a goddamn match one day. You never know. Maybe that'll happen one day too. So
I don't know, Luke. That one, honestly, I feel for you, but I really don't feel for you with the Phil Foden thing because you just know with Pep, you know the situation this year. I mean, Foden is just not getting minutes. So that's what it is.
Yep. I agree. I have definitely punished myself in that way. But with Southampton coming up, I won't be able to transfer him out. I have him.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold him, and we'll go from there. Hopefully he starts in game week 9. Quick little piece of trivia here for you, Paul. Could you guess the person who had the highest XG during game week 8? What is the one player who got the most XG by a pretty sizable amount?
I didn't get to watch all the matches. Is it Jimenez?
It is Jimenez. Ding, ding, ding. Very nicely
And
played.
Guess who we shouted out on the podcast last week?
That was you. Paul shouted out Raul Jimenez on the podcast.
But also on our Twitter too. So check that out.
Raul Jimenez had an XG of 1.69, ended up with 1 goal, and Fulham might have made a mistake. They probably should have had Jimenez take that penalty that they
Let
got
him
in the
on
first
pens.
half. Instead, Pereira goes up, misses the penalty, and
shitty pen too, by the way.
it was pretty bad.
Really, really abysmal.
Martinez completely ate that up and definitely let everyone know about it.
Of course
as he
did.
typically does.
Of course he did.
But second in XG for the week, we had Curtis Jones with an XG of 1.13. And third overall, maybe a bit surprising to some people, is Buonanotte from Leicester. He gets an XG of 1 and 1 goal.
Yeah, man. I don't know why the hell I started a defender from Southampton and from Leicester. Like,
I don't know the answer to that one.
I think I was hoping just like a cancelization, but like those matches usually are like the bottom tier matches are kind of more like championship matches, where it's just going to be cagey and like goals everywhere. So
they will be.
I need to adjust my thinking with that one.
Okay, here's a great final topic for us to end the podcast on. It has been incredibly difficult to find reliable defenses to get clean sheets from. Up to this point in the season, it has been so difficult to find defenders you can rely on for points. People have tried to go double Arsenal. They've lost clean sheets against Leicester, Southampton, Bournemouth, and no one can find that one place to go to find clean sheets. There's not an option at the moment, right? So my question to you, Paul, what defense do you think could potentially be worth investing in? Maybe based upon their fixtures, maybe based upon how they've been playing. Is there a team that stands out to you as being potentially the best team to invest in to hopefully get some clean sheets?
Well, Luke, I'm going to kind of like expose myself a little bit here, where earlier in the season and probably up to this match week, I've probably been shitting on Nottingham Forest way too much. And I think they're a realistic option going forward. I mean, they have lower tier options. With Sells is probably one of the best goalkeepers in the game. They have other defenders that you can invest in that I just think that's a good option. But I really think the best way to go about this is to find lower tier options in a team that you believe in.
So
By
you're
lower
saying,
tier, I mean
you're
like
saying
money-wise.
cheaper options.
Yeah, cheaper
So
options that you know are going to play.
Your hypothesis is just cut all the cash out of the back and then reinvest it to the midfield or strikers.
That's what I'm saying. But
Okay.
at the same time, too, in attack and defenses that you believe in over the long haul. So like teams where it's like, okay, well maybe they have 2 bad fixtures, and then farther down the line they have 4 or 5, like just over the whole season, like say like Arsenal or Nottingham Forest or Liverpool. Like find a lower tier Liverpool option that could be in your team, or just invest in like one Liverpool, one Arsenal asset, and then maybe disregard my budget idea, but like just have a set plan about for the rest of the season, because like you said, the clean sheets are hard to find. Just having a practical idea. And honestly, I think Liverpool or even Nottingham Forest, like I said earlier, are good options.
I completely agree with that. I think, well, Nottingham Forest, I don't know if I'm completely on for that one. They've been pretty fortunate in their XG number. They've conceded 6 goals, but they've allowed an XG of about 11. So they have one of the biggest XG variances across any team out there. Basically, they've been getting pretty lucky that they haven't been conceding, is what that tells me.
Yeah.
And there's a couple teams out there like Newcastle United. They have been really poor this season. They've conceded 8 goals. They've allowed an XG of about 15. So that number could be a lot higher for them for the goals allowed. And over time, we do expect these numbers to revert to the mean a little bit, right? Someone like Wolves, they have been really unfortunate. They've allowed an XG of 16, which sucks, but they've given up 23 goals. So
that's that Chelsea match.
Yeah, that Chelsea match made a big difference as far as that goes. I do expect that, and I know I said this last week, I think Tottenham's defense could be a worthwhile investment. They have been conceding some of the lowest XG in the league. We know they're attacking, so those players they have, there's a possibility of them getting returns amongst everything else. If I look at the back four that Tottenham consistently start of Udogie, Van de Ven, Romero, and Pedro Porro, all 4 of those I could see returning in a match outside of the clean sheet that they would be getting potentially, right?
I agree with that.
There's somewhat of attacking threat amongst all 4 of them. So, in my opinion, there's upside there outside of just the potential of clean sheets. And another team that I want to highlight as well that I think is a potential investment for looking at for your back line is Fulham. Fulham have been really good from an XG perspective. They've been pretty unlucky with the chances they have conceded. And they're a very stable team, right? We know what we're going to get from them week in, week out. And I think the best opportunity there is probably going to go to stick with Anthony Robinson if you have him in your team. If you have him in your team, do not sell him, right? Yeah. I do not think with their upcoming fixtures, they have Everton away, Brentford at home, Crystal Palace away, Wolves at home. Keep your Fulham assets. Do not sell them going into this run, because looking at the numbers, they've been very good defensively, but they've also been pretty creative in the attack as well. So something to keep in mind there, that Fulham are one of the best statistical teams out there at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, they're very balanced. I mean, if you look at them from the assets they have in the back line and the midfield, like you can find options just as an FPL manager, but also you're right, Luke, just as holistically as a football team, they're very balanced. They can attack teams in different ways than they could last year. And they're actually sneakily kind of deep. Like they have options on their bench too. So, I mean, I don't know. I just think this is a team that's really fun to watch, and it's going to be cool to see where they go this year, because hopefully Fulham have their highest finish ever in the Premier League this year. That'd be awesome to see.
I hope so. They've definitely been putting in the performances that warrant them finishing higher up the table than they have in the past.
Absolutely.
On that note, I think that'll probably bring us to the end of the podcast. Paul, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners out there?
I think Cole Palmer and Son are the best captaincy shouts for this coming week.
You don't think Haaland is?
I can't talk about him. No, I can't talk about him. I don't have him on my team, so I can't talk about him.
Okay. Do you have Cole Palmer in your Cole Palmer in your team, Paul?
I don't have Cole Palmer either.
Will you be getting Cole Palmer into your team?
There's a possibility.
I hear there's a cold front coming through.
It's a little chilly, but not here. Honestly,
get out those sweaters.
I probably won't.
You're not going to? Okay. Yeah.
We'll see.
There's a possibility I might completely just tear up my team after this week, or I might roll and then going to game week 10 with 4 free transfers, because I will be going into game week 9 with 3 free transfers, which is nice to have, given that my team could probably use some invasive surgery at the moment.
But see, look, this is the thing when I'm saying about even just Premier League narratives week to week. What did we say last week on the podcast about your team?
I know that it looks great. Here's the thing, right?
Oh, I opened the door.
The thing about this is I know I should probably roll a transfer. And on the other side, I also know that I hated my team this week, right? With the results that they got. And what we talk about here over and over again is that FPL cannot be a results-based analysis. It has to be looking at the decisions you make before the match has started and then analyzing that. Because what happens on the pitch, we can't control that. That is completely out of our hands. 4 goals from Tottenham and none of my attackers return, with high XG for Brennan Johnson and Solanke is somewhat involved. There's nothing I can do about that, right?
That's a fact, yeah.
So here's the thing. I have to continually remind myself that I don't need to tear up my team. It was just a bad week for the players that I had. That's just, variance was not in my favor this week. And that's ultimately all it was.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. In the day, that's what FPL is. It's the managers that are consistent and that play in the same way every week, even if they don't perform in the next week and they keep the most level head. That's how you get better at this game. It really is.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it feels like if we were running a marathon, we're probably at like mile 8 or 9 right now, something like that.
Yeah, I'd say maybe farther back.
Maybe like 6 or 7. But it feels like I've probably had to stop 5 or 6 times at this point. And at this point in running my marathon, it's been a painful one.
Well, Luke, honestly, I think in your marathon, you've actually run back a couple miles in the wrong direction. and then you've actually had to, you went off road, got a little distracted, lost in the woods. And then you ran back and you went down the wrong road and you realized you were going north and you were actually supposed to be going south. And now, Luke, your team's on a good pathway and you're on the course. You're going forward. So that's all that really matters.
I appreciate the positivity there. It is much needed at this point. And, it's going to go a long way because we need the positive vibes right now in my team.
Mm-hmm. It'll turn.
My final thoughts for everyone out there. I think the main thing I really want to drive home from this podcast is if you have Haaland, I would recommend captaining him for game week 9.
We're selling him.
And not what Paul said. If you have Saka in your team, I would recommend selling him and then getting him back in for game week 12 or a little bit afterwards. With the fixtures and him possibly being injured still, I think it's not worth the possibility of him not playing. Get on another premium who has a good run of fixtures and we know is going to be playing, and then get back to him whenever you need to. So that is my final thought for the podcast.
I agree with you, Luke. Search out the X minutes. That's the number that we love the most. If they're going to be on the pitch, there's a chance something will happen. So
we love X minutes and we love XG. That is very, very true. But thank you all for joining us for this podcast. It was really fun. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will talk with you all soon.
Bye, everybody.